Next, we're going to take a look at creating a pivot chart based on the data that we have in this pivot table. And obviously with other charts or any kind of graphs, anytime you can create a chart, it just gives the user a little bit better understanding of what the data is all about in your pivot table. So in addition to creating the chart to make it more visual appealing, with a pivot chart you can also filter just like we filtered with the pivot table. So it adds a lot of dynamics and more variety to your pivot chart as well. So and you can create a chart based on information in an existing pivot table, but also if you don't have a pivot table already created and you want to create a chart, you can create a chart first and then the pivot table will automatically be created in the background. And we're going to take a look at creating a pivot chart both ways. And if you'll look through paragraphs at the bottom of page 123 and 124, they give you a little bit more information about pivot charts and how to create those. We're going to begin with project 3E using the current workbook that we've generated a pivot table in, and we're going to create a pivot chart based on this information. So to do that, we're going to click somewhere inside the pivot table information, obviously. And again, if you're outside of the pivot table, you lose all your contextual tabs, and in this case we wouldn't be able to create the chart without that. So you need to make sure that you're inside the pivot table area, and then on the pivot table tools options tab in the tools area you'll see pivot chart. So go ahead and click on pivot chart, and you have all the same categories that we had when we've created charts previously. We want to leave it with the column category or the column type, and then we want the clustered cylinder. Should be the second row down, first column. So click on that, and then we can click OK, and that will generate a pivot chart. And we can kind of move this around here. I'm going to get a four-sided arrow and kind of move it below the existing pivot table. And there's a couple things you can do to make that a little bit better. They suggest resizing the pivot table. We can do that, but also we could resize the chart to make it a little bit bigger, using the sizing handles on the left and the right. So we can do that. Your main goal of the pivot chart, though, is to make sure that all the information along the x-axis is showing, and anything along the vertical axis or the y-axis is also visible as well. So you can see it's based the information from the regions that we have at the top and also the salespeople. So the regions are showing at the bottom on the x-axis. Salespeople are actually represented by each one of the data series. So a couple of things with this though. Notice we have little drop down arrows to the right of the salespeople and also the region. So if you wanted to only show, let's say the south, let's go with north. We'll go with the north region. If you only want to show the north region, you can click on the little filter button, and you may not be able to see this, but it looks just like any other filter drop down box. The bottom portion lists all the options, and there's a select all checkbox. I'm going to click on that to deselect it, and then I'm going to click on just the checkbox that represents north, and then I'll click OK. And so here you see just the north region represented by each one of the salespeople. Okay, and you can also see that you're in the filtered mode by the filter symbol on the region tab. So I'm going to clear out that filter. It brings them all back. You can do the same thing with the salesperson. If you want to see all of the sales from, let's say, Clark, we can deselect by clicking the select all checkbox, and that deselects the check marks. And then we can click on Clark. And at the very, very bottom, I know you can't see this, but down at the bottom of that drop down filter menu, there's an OK button. So click on that. And now we're only seeing sales for each of the regions for Clark. So great tool of being able to quickly redisplay information and show the information in different ways, a variety of ways on your chart. So I'm going to clear out that filter, clear filter from salesperson to get back the original information. And then they want to take this chart that we have in the sheet and we're going to move it to a new sheet. So I'm just going to make sure that the chart is selected. Oh, I missed something. I wanted to show you. At the top is model, the little model tab. So again, you're not going to be able to see this, but all the models that we saw before in the pivot table are listed there. Again, you could deselect all of them and choose just one or several. You can choose all the CXs again, and that would be then represented in the chart as well. Okay? Okay, so back to moving. We do want to move the chart. So if you look up on your ribbon, you should see Move Chart. We want to go to a new sheet, and that new sheet, they want us to call it PivotChart. So we can name it as we go, or we could rename it too after it's already been moved. I'll click OK. And now you've got your pivot chart in front of the pivot table sheet, which they haven't named or asked us to name yet. But so it places that chart right in front of the sheet that contains the information on which it was built. So again, there's your chart. And as always, you would want to add chart titles, X and Y axis titles, to further describe the information on the chart. Okay. All right, in project 3F, we're going to take a look at creating a pivot chart from scratch. So if we didn't have a pivot table to begin with, you can certainly create a chart, and as you create that chart, it generates a pivot table in the background. So they do want us to open up the premium fitness sales again, so let me get to that. All right, we'll open this up. This is our original file again. So you can see all the data. There's no pivot table in the workbook, but let's say your boss or a coworker wants you to generate a chart based on the information here. And that chart, they want us to build a chart that displays sales by manufacturer and by region. So we'll probably have the manufacturer along the x-axis, and then the region will be in our legend, or will be represented in the data series. So in any event, to create a chart first, we still have to go through the steps of selecting. So we're going to select A4 through G47. And then again, we'll go back to the Insert tab. Tables group, you'll see Pivot Table. The bottom portion of that, we want to choose Pivot Chart this time. So click on that, and then we're going to select a table of range. That's already been selected. We selected it this time before we went into the dialog box. And we'll go ahead and put it on a new sheet and click OK. So now it's in a new sheet of its own. We're going to start building that very similar to how we built the pivot table. And so they want us again to choose all the sales by manufacturer, by region. So I'm going to click on the manufacturer, and that puts it down in the axis field. Okay. Then we also want model, and this one we're going to drag it. We'll take model and drag it up into the legends fields. Actually, regions needs to be up there. I'm so sorry. Let's deselect model, and we want region, and the region is the one that should go into the legend. So I'm going to take region, drag it up into the legend area. Watch this being built here. And then also they just want sales. Remember the sale price, it'll automatically go into the values area because it knows it has numbers in it. So let's see if we can move that over there. And so now we've generated the chart, but notice, you probably saw this as we were pulling it down, it generated the pivot table in the background as well. Okay, so we've got a chart. You'd want to again add X and Y axis titles and a main chart title as well. So you can go from either place. You can start it from scratch, create the chart from scratch, and it will create the pivot table in the background. And actually we can move this pivot chart to another sheet like we did previously. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. And again, I just want to throw this out there. Again, pivot chart, same thing. You could pivot the regions. You probably saw me do this, but I can move region, put it down on the x-axis. And then move manufacturer up in the legends, and that kind of makes a different twist on how the chart appears. So now we have regions at the bottom on our x-axis. Manufacturers are actually representing the data series. So a lot of flexibility in those pivot tables and in the pivot charts. At the bottom of page 127, you might want to read through the functions of a pivot table and a pivot chart there in table 4.1. Make sure you review through that. In project 4, we're going to take a look at how we can add spark lines to a worksheet to show trends. And essentially spark lines are little tiny miniature charts that are housed in the background of a cell. And we can create charts that scan over several cells, but this is a quick way to kind of give a quick shot of how trends are going up or down, or maybe certain patterns, highs and lows, are appearing in a worksheet. And if you look on page 128, they give you some examples of the various types of spark lines that they have. There's a line spark line that you can use, or a column spark line. You can see that down in figure 4.8. And then at the very bottom is a win-loss spark line, where it shows you positive and negative values. So great tool of being able to provide additional visuals to a worksheet to kind of bring to light what the data is representing. And in 4A, project 4A on page 129, we're going to use the New Age Dental Quarter 1 Fees workbook that we had created earlier. This is the one that we used the consolidated feature on. If you recall, there are 3 sheet tabs in there. In the fee summary, we use the consolidate feature to summarize in total all of the revenue, I guess, or the fees for all of the doctors, or all the dentists, I should say. So what we're going to do is insert some spark lines, an actual, it'll be a line spark line that gives a trend of what happens over the first 3 months for each one of these items. So to insert a spark line, the first thing that you want to do is select the range of cells that you want to insert the spark lines in. And then we'll go to the Insert tab in the Spark Lines group. There's the 3 that we were talking about, the line, column, and win-loss. We want the line spark line. And then it's asking what data range do you want to include in here. Well, we want B6 through D14 to be the range. And it says choose where you want the spark lines to be placed. We already have that selected, G6 through G14. You can see that right there. Okay, and then we'll click OK. And so now you can kind of see what's going on here. If you'll notice, let's look at the cleanings and fillings. Notice there was 9,000 here, and then it dropped down to 7,000. There's 2,000, 5,000, 4,000, so it's going up and then back down. So you can see a visual of what each one of those services are doing over the period of months, the first quarter. So it's a great tool to kind of, again, bring to light what's going on with all this data, instead of trying to visually look at the numbers and determine what's going on. The graph hopefully brings that to light. And they also mentioned back on page 128 that since these these charts are in the background, you can type over them. So you could type and describe what's happening in that cell if you wanted. In the actual, on page 128, they have quarter 4 set new record or whatever. So you could bring to light whatever the biggest trend is or whatever, and you can type that right in the cell. Okay? Once the spark lines are in there, you can also customize those. Make them, again, kind of stand out a little bit more by changing the font color, adding additional markers, things like that. So we're going to take a look in project 4B, and we're going to customize these spark lines. The first thing that we're going to do is add a different color to the lines themselves. We're going to change them from blue to red. And to make changes to the spark lines, you do need to click in that area that has the spark lines, and by doing that you'll get the Sparkline Tools Design tab, is what we want. And then you have all these options on the ribbon to make changes to your spark lines. So the first thing we're going to do is change the line color, and to do that it's in the Style group, and then we'll click on the Sparkline Color drop down arrow, and we're going to change that to dark red. So you can see the red colors there changing. We're also going to look in the Show group, and we're going to click on High Point. And what will happen there is wherever the high point is in each one of those cells, it'll put a marker on it. And then in addition to that, we're going to go to, again in the Show group, the Markers button. Click on Markers, and then that puts markers at the other points, but this is really hard to see, but they're slightly different colors for those markers. So there should be a little bit different orientation that stands out from the one that was the high marker. So and we may be able to change that marker color so it's a little bit darker too. Let's see if we can do that. Let's go back up to the Style group and choose the marker color, and we'll click on Markers, and then we'll choose Black Text 1. That'd be the That makes them a little bit different color. And if you wanted to choose a different color out of there that would stand out, you could certainly do that. I'm not sure what that would be right now, but you can do that. And then also you could change the color of the high point. Just trying to think of a color that would really make it stand out. Let's look at orange. That kind of makes it varied there, but I'm not sure how the coloring goes. But you can you can customize those various markers and the high points and low points if you use those as well. Okay. They want us to widen the column just so we can kind of see a little bit more of what's going on. They want us to increase the column width to 22. So we'll do that. That kind of brings things to life a little bit more too. And then still in this area, let's put in a color in the background. So we're going to select G6 through G14, and then we're going to add a blue fill color. So I'm going to go back to the Home tab, and in the font group, the fill color button, we'll use blue accent lighter 80%. So again, I don't know if those colors are really doing anything for us, but just know that you can do that, and it kind of makes them stand out a little bit more. Probably at the top here we need to take out those lines, those grid lines there, and we can do that by applying a white background fill color. So I'm going to go back to the fill color button, choose white, and that kind of lines that up, makes it look part of the other, like the other part of the title. And then we'll also add a thick bottom border to that, and hopefully that'll help. Okay, so now it's starting to look like it's part of the rest of the worksheet. We're also going to put a title in here. They say January to March trends. Okay, so again, that's giving you a little bit more of a pictorial, a visually appealing way of bringing these numbers to light using the spark lines. Okay, so that concludes chapter 4. Again, chapter summaries on page 131. The concepts check is on page 133, and as always, please complete the assessments. Use these features as much as you can. Try to familiarize yourself with those features that we did learn in the chapter. And as always, feel free to email me or call me if you have questions.